Welcome to Design to Thrive with Dr. Brooke. I'm Dr. Brooke Silverhorn, your podcast host. Here, we share wisdom for women and create legacy for daughters through conversations around health and life, family and faith, rooted in nervous system healing, embodied living, and God-designed rhythms. In today's episode, we are taking the conversation further around lessons that I learned through my healing journey from a thyroid cancer diagnosis. I am so excited about this conversation today, though I will admit that I actually recorded this last week, and then I decided that I was not in the best state of energy to have that conversation, and it didn't come out exactly the way that I wanted to. So I went against my done is better than perfect mantra and decided to re-record it. I hope that I am able to communicate to you this message in a way that really lands and really has an impact on you in a way that it had an impact on me and my life. This concept that I am going to share with you today, I first learned from one of my mentors. His name is Dr. Alok Trivedi, and I first came into his world in late 2017. I had joined a mastermind group in early 2017 that was largely made up of chiropractors, and Dr. Trivedi was friends with the chiropractor who was the head of this mastermind group. And so he was also a member of this group. And many of the members who were doing things outside of chiropractic would share their wisdom from time to time. And Dr. Trivedi was one of them. He had actually spoken at an in-person event that they hosted that I was unable to actually attend, but he ended up sharing a recording of something that he had done for another group, and it was content that he was teaching on at the time. And I remember listening to this recording, and it was centered around money. But as with everything in life, there are connection points to money and health and family and all of the 7 areas of life. So this example that I'm going to give to you, you may not have challenges with money in your life. It may be related to your health. It may be related to relationships or work, but I hope that it will be the start of creating connections in your mind. So he talked about money and how there were drawbacks to having a lot of money. As humans, and especially as an entrepreneur, we tend to have a goal of creating wealth and having $1 million practice or whatever the case may be. So when he said there were drawbacks to having money, it sparked something in my mind. And I thought, that doesn't make any sense. There are no drawbacks to money. But it was the fact that it caused a shift in my mind and made me wonder, made me curious. I started listening to more things that he had put into the world for free. And eventually I started working with him and going deeper. So in early 2018, I actually joined one of his programs. At the time, it was called Aligned Mastery, and he has evolved from that, but that program was foundational in creating change in my health, in my mind, in how I perceive my life and my life experiences, and really how I work with and guide other individuals in my chiropractic practice and also in my one-on-one work that I do with individuals. And that is that every experience that we have in life has 2 sides to it. Oftentimes, we only see one side. Like if you were to drop a coin on the ground or come across a penny on the ground, which there's not that many pennies out there anymore, but you would only see one side. It would be either heads or tails. And the same thing often occurs in our lives. We have an experience, and our nervous system and our brain perceives one side of that experience. So when I started working with Dr. Trivedi, he, would say things and it would spark something in me. And I would be like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that my divorce had good things about it? I can't see that. Or me being diagnosed with cancer. How can cancer be a good thing? And so it sparked conversation with myself and Dr. Trivedi and the other participants in the group. And eventually, I attended an in-person program that Dr. Trivedi did. I won't go into huge depth because it is his proprietary information and his processes, but he walks you through different processes that help to rewire your brain to move from your amygdala, your brainstem, and a sympathetic state, an all or nothing state in the mind, into what is called your prefrontal cortex, which is the higher thinking part of the brain. And so these processes that he uses helps you to see how an experience or an individual has two sides to them, just like you have two sides to yourself. So maybe you had an experience. In my case, I worked through my relationship with my first husband that I had a lot of resentment and anger and also guilt and shame around that relationship and our subsequent divorce. I grew up in a Christian home where divorce was not on the table. So I went into that marriage very hopeful. And yet it was an abusive marriage. So I did my very best to be a good Christian wife. And at the end of the day, that relationship dissolved. And I am so very grateful that it did. So I was able to go through these processes with Dr. Trivedi and see that there were aspects of him that while I mostly looked at the negative, there were positive things about him as a human being and our relationship. There were some things that I perceived as being only negative, and yet there were benefits to that relationship, its existence, and also its ending. So I'll share a few of those things because you may be sitting there and you're going through a difficult season in your health or in your relationship. Maybe you are separated from your spouse and you are having a hard time with it. You're experiencing resentment towards that individual or the emotions of guilt and shame because you also are a Christian and you don't want to go down the route of divorce. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you one way or another, though I will say I did have a Christian counselor tell me, I can't tell you to get divorced, but what I can say is that God wouldn't want you to be and stay in an abusive marriage. So, I digress. In my relationship with my first husband, I was very resentful towards him because of the moments that he was physically and mentally, emotionally abusive. I was resentful towards him for the times where he would not let me speak. I was resentful because he did not contribute much financially to the upbringing of our daughter. And at the same time, I can simultaneously be thankful for who he is because the things that I perceived as negative about him and our relationship made me stronger. And it made me speak up and use my voice. And it gave me my daughter. And our marriage ending meant that I became a single mom, which again, you can see all of the negative drawbacks of that experience in my life. And also it made me who I am today. And then I met my husband, Jason, and we got married and we had our daughter, Ashlyn. And eventually we moved to Florida. And now I have my own practice. And I love my life. So if you are experiencing something that is difficult, or you have something in the past that you maybe are ruminating on, that you are having a difficult time getting over, it's not that you necessarily have to get over it. It's okay to feel all of the feelings. And simultaneously, I want you to see all of the ways that it has actually or is actually benefiting your life and your future. On the flip side, there are things that we experience in life that we perceive only good about, and we can become elated and almost addicted to those positive experiences, be addicted to the idea of making a lot of money or having people always like you and support you. And maybe if you have a business, having only good reviews. And I want to challenge you. There are drawbacks to that only positive perception of those aspects of your life. I had a really great upbringing. My parents were very supportive, especially through seasons in my life where I had challenge from other sources, from teachers and coaches and quote unquote friends or relationships. And because my parents were very supported, I may have become a little elated by the fact that I got so much support from them. This is a hard one, and it is probably the most challenging to actually unravel when you are rewiring your nervous system and changing your brain and your perception of experiences in life. So, looking at the things that you found really positive in your experience and finding the drawbacks of that is hard. Sometimes it is actually harder to find the drawbacks of things you perceive as good or positive than it is to find the benefits of things you perceive as negative. And so it's actually, I'm struggling to come up with examples, but I will do my very best. My parents have a really great marriage. In fact, they are going on 50 years of marriage. Both sets of my grandparents also had very long, loving relationships. And so for me, my perception of marriage was a positive one. And I think that as a teenager and young adult, I wanted so badly to be married and start a family because of the positive example that my family gave. And there were definite drawbacks to that. I was elated by the idea of these amazing, loving Christian marriages that lasted, in my grandparents' case, 60 plus years, that they lived and loved till death do them part. And I jumped into a marriage with my first husband because of addiction to the idea of beautiful marriage relationship. I jumped into that marriage with him, and I can look back and say that there were drawbacks to me doing that and wanting that beautiful marriage for myself. And so I had to have some challenge in the area of relationships in order to bring me to a place of neutrality, that I wasn't swinging high and low in my emotions around relationships and marriage. So that when I started my relationship with my husband, Jason, who I'm going on now 15 years of marriage with, that when we started our relationship, there was more emotional balance. We saw all sides for the most part. There's still stuff that we're learning and that we're growing, but we saw more sides of each other, and we saw the good and the bad, and we worked through those things together versus this relationship is perfect and we're so perfect together. But then the reality behind that is that when you are first starting a relationship, you put your best foot forward and may be trying to impress another person and subordinating your highest values to what that other person values. You individually have highest values and they are unique to you. And I do a whole workshop on this, determining your values and living your life in alignment with those things. And there are times where you may subordinate your values to someone else's values, or you may have someone else who injects their values onto you, meaning their values are kind of pushed onto you and you feel like you have to make them a priority. Well, when you go into a relationship and into a marriage and you are not being your authentic self, you're trying to impress the other person, you are doing things that maybe you don't love because you want them to like you and love you. So you're doing things that they love. That creates an imbalanced relationship and an imbalanced marriage. And then eventually what can happen is that you start to experience emotions of guilt, shame, resentment, pride. It could be any one of those, because if you're elated about the thing that you love to do, but then you make what they love to do bad, that's pride. And if it's the opposite where they're forcing you into doing what they love to do, and suddenly you don't get to be in your highest values, that creates resentment. What I hope you come away from this podcast is every experience you have in life has two sides to it. There are simultaneously both benefits and drawbacks, and they balance each other out. And when you see the balance, when you can say, oh, that financial struggle that I had, it was really hard. There were a lot of drawbacks to that. And simultaneously, I learned so much from it. I gained a lot of benefits. I'm better with my finances now. Or that health challenge was crazy hard. Healing from cancer it was rough. And simultaneously, I had a lot of people supporting me during that season of my life. And I learned more about how to support my body's optimal health and well-being and to set boundaries and blah, blah, blah. All of those things. Or this relationship was really great for a season, but there were also drawbacks because I didn't spend as much time with my friends and maybe I wasn't my authentic self. And it brings those experiences, it kind of balances the scales. It brings them to a place of neutrality, which we call the 0 point. And when you come to a place where every experience in your life is neither good nor bad, it just is, and you're in that 0 point, that my friends is, and when you experience that, you will feel a weightlessness in your body and in your mind. And I will share with you the first time that I felt that deeply in my body was at that in-person experience with Dr. Trivedi. And I was doing some really hard work around my relationship with my first husband, him as a person. And at the end of the day, after we had done all of this really very mentally heavy work and emotionally heavy work, I felt the moment where my brain went from amygdala, where things are hard and things are very polarized. It's good or bad, right or wrong. And then it shifted into my limbic system, which is a little bit more emotion, but still some polarity there. And then eventually it shifted into my prefrontal cortex. And I looked up. I said, I see it. And it still brings me tears of gratitude today because I am so grateful. I am so grateful for him and for our marriage and our daughter. And I am so grateful for our divorce. And here's the cool piece that I'm just going to share about that experience at that event with Dr. Trivedi was because when I had that moment, part of his process is that he has you partner with another participant in the room and do a surrogate exercise where you essentially are talking to the other participant as though they are that other person that you were working on the relationship. So in my case, my first husband. And there were only 2 men in that room that day. One was a participant and the other was Dr. Trivedi, and the rest were women. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. Like, these women were working on former spouses or boyfriends or dads. So it was a lot of like female to male energy in the room. And I was like, man, are all of these women going to just like bombard this individual man who is in the room and ask him to be their surrogate? And that's not what happened. So for me, what happened was I knew that I needed to go with this other woman in the room. And my first husband had a lot of tattoos. That's a story for another time. And she had a lot of tattoos. And when we were married, there was a period of time where his hair was a little bit longer and he would slick it back. And that's how she had her hair. And so there was a moment in time during this conversation where it was almost like I was talking directly to him, even though she was the person sitting across from me. I said the things that I needed to say and expressed the gratitude that I felt. And then she responded, and it was as though he was talking through her. And then I said, thank you. I love you. And I felt that in my being. And at the end of the day, when everyone had finished, we were kind of coming down from this amazing, beautiful moment. And we were talking as a group. And Dr. Fetty looked over at me and he said, oh my, it's as though your thyroid has shrunk before our very eyes. So I did not have my thyroid removed when I was first diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And so I still have enlargement. There is scar tissue present there. In fact, I found that out only in March, so just a couple months ago, that there is scar tissue present in my thyroid. And there are times where emotions and stress and inflammation in my body will cause my thyroid to appear differently. But in that particular, all of the weight and stress and emotions that were bound in my body from that resentment and guilt and shame that I felt and held onto from that relationship, marriage, and subsequent divorce literally melted away. And with that, my thyroid shrunk. So I share this all with you because you cannot separate your emotions from past experiences from your physical being. They are interconnected. In fact, they are really one and the same because you are not just a physical body who has emotions. You are actually, in fact, a spiritual being that expresses emotions, that has this physical body as how you show up in the world. So for me, that mental, emotional healing piece is by far the biggest part of healing that I have gone through in my journey. And it is one of the reasons why I have been trained in different mind-body healing methods, including the Inspire method, holographic manipulation therapy, and a few others. If this podcast spoke to you in any way, there are a couple things that I want to ask of you. First, if there is something that you feel chaotic emotions around, maybe sit with it. If it is a negative experience, ask yourself, where are there benefits to that in my life? And if it's positive, where are there drawbacks? The second thing is, I am creating a in-person immersion experience. It is a weekend on the beach in Florida in September. And I am so incredibly excited about it. But some of what we will be doing at that experience is learning about and working through some of these pieces that I'm talking about in this podcast today. And we will be creating change, not only in your mind, but also in your body using somatic exercises and practices. You'll get an adjustment. You'll be nourished. You'll be supported by community. And so if that's something that would be of interest to you, I invite you to comment, leave a message, and I will send you the details. I hope that this was a blessing to you today. I pray that it has an impact. And if it sparked something in you, know that that is not an accident. And remember, you are designed to thrive.